If you're one of the many, many people living with trauma-related symptoms from abuse and neglect in childhood, I know you've had to work extra hard just to have some of the things in life that come more easily to other people. And this is called complex PTSD. And it's the kind that comes from chronic, intense stress, usually, but not always, in childhood. Now, you might already know that you have it. You might be learning about it, working on it, doing something about it. But if you're like most people with CPTSD, overcoming those symptoms is kind of, jerky. It starts and stops. When it's not getting you the healing you need, it can leave you feeling like you're stuck like this and maybe feeling afraid that you'll never be happy or loved or fulfilled or financially stable. And the truth is, those risks are real, but it does not have to be that way. Everything gets better when you find an approach to healing that works for you. Now, granted, it's hard to know when you're first starting out on your healing what is going to work for you. But if you give up and you don't try, well, that's how people get stuck. That's how it happens. Maybe you tried some approaches to healing from trauma, but you kind of only did it halfway. Like, I get letters like that from students and they say, well, I kind of sort of tried the daily practice thing you teach a couple of times, but it didn't work. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't think it would work if you didn't really do it, daily. Or maybe you are someone who knows what works for you and you know what steps to take, but you haven't found that power inside to keep moving forward. And I want to talk about this today to encourage you to take your healing seriously, to double down on it so that you can heal. And I'm going to lay out 10 things that you can do if you're ready to move forward with that right now. And obviously, not all of these will apply to you, but these are the 10 things that help me and that I teach to all the people in my coaching programs and my courses. And when you've heard everything that I'm going to explain to you about them, you can pick one or two that are the most important to you and start implementing them today. I would encourage you to take the ones that, without healing them, have been causing you the most pain. And of those, to ask yourself which ones are actually fixable for you right now. So you can pick one or two things to change in your life that will give you a win fairly quickly and with certainty know that that will make a difference, right? You probably already know a change or two that you could make that would meet this criteria, but setting a goal that is a big and easy win is a good strategy to develop confidence and positive feelings about making more changes. So, number one, learn what complex PTSD is, not just what you've heard on the internet, not just what other people say about it, and not focusing all your energy on what might be the diagnosis of the people who hurt you. That's not the same thing as understanding what's going on with you and your brain and your nervous system and learning about that, learning about dysregulation and what that does to you, and about emotional dysregulation and what that does to you, how that impacts your life. And we didn't know until very recently that CPTSD is an injury to your brain and nervous system. And a lot of therapists and clinical professionals, they still don't know this. So it's especially important that you educate yourself so you can make decisions about your healing based on current knowledge. Number two, when you look at yourself and how you're doing with your healing process, be willing to notice some of the problems that maybe have nothing to do with trauma. Now, it's true, CPTSD can make it hard to focus. It can make it hard to be consistent. It can be hard to be kind and considerate as you want to be to other people. It might make it hard to stay present. And it might have damaged your relationships. It might have damaged your health. Okay, so all those things are trauma related. But everybody has a couple of problems that are just ordinary human problems. So it could be something like, maybe you're often late. A lot of people struggle with that. You don't have to be traumatized. Trauma could be implicated in that, but sometimes that's one of the things that you just have. And the reason I love the problems that are just normal person problems is because they're a little easier to solve. You don't have to heal your brain necessarily to get that going. Now, it could be that you need to keep your kitchen cleaner, and the whole kitchen smells like garbage all the time. And when people come over, you feel ashamed. Now, I know that trauma can drive that kind of thing, but it's also a problem that anybody might have, and it's a solvable problem. I love low-hanging fruit problems, things that you can solve quickly and just get a little win. Number 3, you can prepare to move your stories about your abuse and neglect that happened to you out of present time looping thoughts, just going over and over them, and into what I call the memory bucket. Now, if you can imagine, there's a bucket, and there's your present time thinking, and there's a memory bucket. So the present time thinking is up here, and the memory bucket is here. CPTSD can trap your emotional and body reactions from old traumatic experiences up here, and then keep them looping in your mind as if they're still happening. It's different than a memory. It's activating all your adrenaline and cortisol, and it speeds your heart rate, it scatters your thoughts, and it puts your whole body in a state of stress. You can't stop thinking about it or reacting to it when you do. That's what I mean by looping. And I call it a looping thought or an electric thought. What you want is to have access to your thoughts and memories, if you want to think about them, but not to be controlled by them, not to be drowning in them. An ordinary memory is one that has the trauma element deactivated. It is not electric. You remember it. You can retrieve that memory if anyone asks you a question about it. And you can remember all the same details about it, but it doesn't trigger this huge physiological and neurological response in you. It's not a stress response thing. If you had trauma, you probably have some of those looping electric thoughts that give you a very charged reaction to certain things, topics. And you probably also have some memories that are not charged. So when I say get ready, one thing that will help you is become open to the idea that you don't always have to be reactive toward the past. I teach a method to calm reactions, and it's called the daily practice. And if you watch this channel, you've heard me talk about this a million times, and I point you towards the description section under every video where there's a link to it. It's free. You can learn and try it in less than an hour, and then there's more videos if you want to go deeper into it. And it can help take the charge out of your natural stream of thoughts by helping you name and release fearful thoughts and resentful thoughts. Now, I'm going to keep teaching under the assumption that you've tried these techniques, but if you haven't, try to hear the essence of what I'm saying here. If you feel anxious at the thought of surrendering your fear and resentment about the world, and some people do because fear and resentment for a lot of us is a primitive form of a boundary. It's just like being anxious about stuff, being angry, it can feel like protection. If that's you, I would just say, do it a tiny bit at a time, do a little bit at a time, the daily practice, and see what happens. And just see if when you do surrender and release your fears about something, does it incapacitate you? Does it make you a doormat? Is that your experience? It's not mine. In fact, it makes me more empowered. It makes me more clear about when something dangerous is in my presence and when I need to act on it. So you can try that for yourself, just a little bit. Stay safe. Just try the daily practice a little bit and just check the temperature. How is it? How do you feel afterwards? You can get that link down below in the description section. If you do sign up for that course, by the way, you get invited to twice monthly live Zoom calls with me. We use the techniques. I take questions. I just did a big call today. It's so much fun together. And it's a great way that people come together and find friends who are walking the same path of healing. All right, number 4 is to stop trying to make other people not trigger you. So if you get very triggered by people, and pretty much everyone with complex PTSD gets triggered by people, that's what makes the connection hard for us. That's why we isolate, right? That's why we have a tendency to do that, or keep people at arm's length. Those interactions get so triggering. So there's a misunderstanding that if we could just get other people to stop behaving the way they do, or saying what they say, or making us feel the way we feel, then we would be okay. And sometimes that's true, but it's usually not true. Because even if they wanted with all their hearts to stop triggering you, they probably couldn't. The trigger is in here. It's for you to work on. And anyway, most people are not willing to try to change everything for you. It's just reality. you learning how to calm your triggers is going to be more effective and easier and more empowering for you than trying to make the world around you change. Now, when you can learn to calm your triggers, you become perceptive and you can begin to tell if someone in your presence is actually a difficult person or if you're feeling triggered and having difficulty, but they're not causing that difficulty. And I'm sure you struggle with that question already. Is it just me or is it them? Am I being crazy or am I being a doormat? And in most cases, you're confused about that question because you have triggers. Learning to know the difference is called discernment. And that's one of the biggest things that we lose with CPTSD is that ability to discern. And when you begin to develop discernment, which you can through my writing techniques and by working with other people or a therapist or peers or a group, you can develop that ability to judge what's coming from another person, what's coming from me, what am I okay with? And what a relief to be clear when you get a strong feeling that someone you meet doesn't belong in your life or something they did was a deal breaker for you versus when someone is a person you want in your life and you can see your triggers for what they are. You can work to make your relationship better. You can be a more trustworthy person for them by calming your triggers and have the power to do that. The other great thing about learning to calm your triggers is that you become flexible. You become able to hang out with a variety of different people. You can be in all kinds of circumstances. You don't have to be so particular and have so-called boundaries about, I don't do this, I don't let people say that. You can start to be flexible and just let people be themselves and let life happen around you. You are safe to relax around people when you know that when you need a boundary and you need to step back from someone, you can. When you know your boundaries and you're prepared to honor them, you can be less afraid to connect with people and instead be more open to them. All the bad things that come with CPTSD, problems with relationships and focusing and balancing your emotions, your stress levels that get activated if you don't get triggered, that's your superpower. If you were to do one thing, learn to notice when you're triggered and bring it down. Now, learning to notice dysregulation and a triggered state in yourself is a huge piece of what I teach in my coaching programs and courses. Dysregulation triggers disconnection from people and it triggers self-defeating behaviors. And when healing begins in these areas, good parts of you have room to just come shining through. Your kindness, your talents, your joy, they all have space to grow. And these are the good parts of you that were suppressed by all the trauma and locked down by your reaction to hurt and trauma. Some people are suppressed for a long time, but only because they were too dysregulated to manage stepping out of their safe zone. In the safe zone, you can't afford to connect with people or face your own mistakes, right? When you learn to calm triggers and re-regulate your emotions and brain, you can take some risks. And when you can take risks, your life grows. Now remember, this is not just to feel better. Now you do have to feel better. You need that, you deserve it. And what it gives you is an opening for the real healing to begin. And that's you becoming yourself and delivering the love and the contribution that you have to bring to the world. All right, number 5, if you want to speed your healing, stop trash talking the people who you choose to have in your life. It's very common for people who don't have CPTSD to just throw labels on people. This person's a narcissist, they're toxic, they're worthless. But if you really want to heal, if you want to double down on your healing, I encourage you to stop using those labels on people and instead just start noticing whatever you call it, the thing that other people do or have that is so troubling for you. The thing to focus on is not the other person anyway, but the way that you get tense or you struggle around them, the way that your emotions rise up or you get dysregulated. That's the part, that's the part where you actually have influence over what happens next. And you do have a right to make decisions about whether to let somebody into your life or not. So now when you're triggered by someone, instead of just telling them, oh, you're a narcissist, and therefore you should read this book I found about narcissists because it never goes over well, take it from me. You can either accept that person or you can step away from the relationship. The more you recover, the more you'll be at peace with the people that you do want in your life, and the more quickly that you'll be willing to step away from people who you don't want in your life. Focusing on yourself is always going to be your superpower. And when you can learn, oh, this is where I get triggered, that's a powerful thing to understand. And this doesn't mean that you should just learn to put up with terrible behavior in others. You want to be aware, you want to be grounded and lucid and clear-headed and clear-eyed and perceptive so that you can make good decisions about how to proceed when somebody begins to treat you badly. Somebody's treating you really well, of course, you want to be at your best. You want to be able to open your heart and enjoy that relationship. Number 6, stop clinging to bad relationships that make you miserable. Now, I have to bring this in any discussion of what it means to double down on your healing. Staying in bad relationships and hemorrhaging all your energy and your cognition to a situation where you're fighting all the time, or you're being treated in an abusive manner, or being gravely disrespected, or you're sad all the time. This will halt your healing. Now, I understand there are relationships where there's an obligation or a duty, as there is with dependent children or with certain other people who rely on you for care. And that may require extra effort and extra support to remove yourself from situations that are destroying your happiness and your chances of healing trauma. But whether it's simple or complicated, it's important to keep moving forward. All right, number 7 is the same thing, but for jobs. Don't stay in work that makes you miserable unless your life depends on it. And there are times when we all have to do what we have to do to get the paycheck, right? But it's not forever. Don't let it be forever. If the paycheck is not the problem right now, I want you to ask yourself, is being miserable at work something you are unconsciously choosing so that you can avoid facing something else that's hard for you? And I talk about this very directly because it's something that I've had to face myself before. And there was a lot of time when I was still at the effect of CPTSD where if I weren't miserable, I would have to notice immediately that there was this giant hole in my life where close relationships were supposed to be. I had superficial relationships. I was getting my self-esteem off the fact that I had a job, but I wasn't happy and I didn't like the way that I was treated. And I stayed 10 years working for an awful boss. The problem wasn't really the boss because I didn't have to stay in that job. The problem was in here. The problem was that I was accepting this unhappy lot in life in exchange for not having to make changes in my life that felt impossible for me. This was when I was a single mother, and I think I would have been too scared to leave the security of that job, except that one day, when the recession of 2008 and 2009 got going, I didn't have a job anymore. And it wasn't an easy transition, but honestly, I'm so glad everything fell through because it was then that I started my first business. Really because nobody would hire me. It was hard to get hired back then. And I had to do something. And that ended up being a really happy way to earn a living for many years. And then I later transitioned to doing this, to becoming Crappy Childhood Fairy, which is an even happier way to make a living. And for those of you who have other extenuating circumstances that are keeping you stuck, just feel the truth of what I'm saying. Let it guide you. Don't let yourself give up on your healing. Trying doesn't always lead to success, of course, but success favors people who try. Number 8, detach from the belief that you passively, just magically attract bad people. I hear this all the time. I attract narcissists. I attract abusers. Well, acknowledge that the issue is not really who is attracted to you, that you attract them. The issue is who you are attracted to, who you tolerate, who you date, who you sleep with and bond with. That is the problem. And that's a much better problem to have than some sort of magical occurrence that flies out of the sky. It's like, oh, look, narcissists are just landing all over me, right? It may seem like that, and occasionally exploitive people do look for vulnerable people, but most of the people problems in your life are more likely to be caused by a lack of boundaries on your part. and you don't have a red flag detector, you attach too quickly, and there you are, and you don't know where they came from. These people end up in your life because you tolerate them. You can't read the signs, you don't see the flags. Next thing you know, you live with them, you work with them, you have kids with them. So it's your tolerance, it's your boundaries, it's your red light detector that you need to switch to the on position if you're going to double down on your healing. I mean, troubled people will take it out of you. They will block you so bad. You have to take responsibility and accept that you are the gatekeeper of who gets into your life. All right, number 9, if you have addictive behaviors, make recovery your first priority. Alcohol, drugs, food, pornography, spending, all that stuff. Your healing will get an enormous boost when you allow yourself to experience life's ups and downs and show up for it and not escape it. Now, I have CPTSD too, and I know how tempting it is to try to grab on and control things or run away from them or just get into some kind of oblivion. And it's almost universal with people with CPTSD. The urge to fly away or crawl into a hole is going to take one form or another. But if you're using anything at all to escape life's ups and downs and those feelings of disappointment and stress and emptiness and loneliness, I totally know what it's like, but if you're using something to escape, it will make healing impossible. The path toward healing always involves facing what's going wrong in your life. Even when you're perfectly healed, life is going to have ups and downs. You're going to lose friends. Big disappointments are going to happen. Outside events are going to happen. You're going to need a means to be able to handle what comes. Whatever approach to healing that you choose for yourself, you're going to need an easy way to self-comfort and bring yourself back out of dysregulation and into re-regulation. If you want to learn how to do it, I can teach you that. All the links for the courses that I teach are down in the description section below. When you always have a way to calm your reactions and comfort yourself, you'll find it's a lot easier to overcome addictions. And that is true freedom. It's when you feel like whatever happens, I will be able to face it. All right, number 10, sit down and ask yourself, it's just a thought exercise, and I really like this one. Ask yourself, if I really had to solve this problem, what are 10 things I could do? And I love doing this. I apply it to all kinds of problems. But it's a really good one to do about how you would heal from your complex PTSD, because you actually have the answers in here, right? And you just haven't had the energy or the focus or the necessity to take action on them right now. So make a list of them, 10 things. You don't have to act on them all at once, or ever really, but make a list and just bring them onto your radar screen. Become aware of them. Look at that list every day. The actions that you could take if you really wanted to move your healing forward. So just let them into your mind and your heart and see what happens. I got really angry today when I was leading a group coaching call. And I was angry not at the person I was talking to, but at the system that claims to be responsible for administering mental health services for people who were abused and neglected as kids. And I was angry because the massive void where up-to-date knowledge is supposed to be, this has a name, by the way, it's called complex PTSD. Well, most providers don't know what it is or what it isn't, and many of them are doling out inappropriate and ineffective advice and treatment. And millions of people are stuck. They can't recover. And even if they had access to professional help, and I'm telling you, most people do not, well, even if you have it, you're not that likely to benefit. The world is full of people who have CPTSD, and they've tried and tried everything that they were told to do, but without the information about what the symptoms are and how you actually can calm them, they're functionally imprisoned in a broken system that favors outdated ideas and dependence on them. It consumes all the resources of your insurance plan, if you have that. The cash cost of it is prohibitively high for most people. But they believe that they dole out the healing rather than, what research shows, what common sense says is that you can manage and you can use each day techniques to calm your symptoms. Yes, you can consult professionals. And yes, there are some people who are in a mental health situation where they must be under the care of a doctor. I know that. But for most cases of CPTSD, there's a system that provides stuff that doesn't work. The old treatments are not really a fit for complex PTSD. That's pretty much all you're going to get, but they are not a fit. There is a very poor evidence of efficacy, really, associated with talk therapy or medication for these things. Talk therapy and medication are great for certain things, but they don't seem to be that effective for complex PTSD. So there are techniques you can use, there are approaches you can use. Most of them need to be self-managed because you need something that feels helpful, whether or not you have access to mental health services, whether or not they know anything about trauma and healing in the last 15 years, discoveries, whether or not their approach for treatment works for you. So there's basic stuff that ought to be the first line of treatment, and it's not recommended. This is what happened in the call today. A new member, has had a serious depression for 4 years, and this is the first time when they encountered my videos, it was the first time they'd heard of complex PTSD, and they had an extremely traumatic childhood. So I'm just trying to understand, they've been in the care of a doctor and a therapist all this time and heavily medicated. I'm trying to understand, how is it that they didn't know about complex PTSD? It's distinct. It's distinct from general anxiety and distinct from depression. It's distinct from ADHD. It's distinct from borderline personality disorder. I think a lot of professionals are out there, they're just lumping it in a way that makes sense to them, given that they haven't read even the most basic research reports. There's very popular books that have been out for a decade that explain this from the point of view of the patient. Two that I would recommend, by the way, if you want to get into this, are Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, and also Pete Walker's CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. Those are two books that give a deep view that, for me, they just the light went on, that's what I have. And I've been talking about what I learned in those books. I've been reflecting on my own experience having this and how I've recovered. And that's why you see thousands and thousands of people coming onto this channel and saying, I have that too. It is described now. And to me, it's basically tyranny to not incorporate knowledge of this condition, which is a known thing now, to not incorporate that knowledge in the way that people access treatment. Because there's a lot of suffering that goes on with CPTSD. I'm mad today. I'm just mad today. I can't even believe that you can get away with charging money to help traumatize people and not know what this is. So I was wondering, is the lack of evidence-based treatment out there ignorance? Or is it malpractice? Is this your problem for having symptoms, or is the problem that the dominant paradigm has stripped you of your agency, your autonomy and power to heal your life? And they take money, but they position themselves, the mainstream healthcare and mental health care, they position themselves as the authority. We know what this is, and all treatment must come through us. If you watch my channel, we have so many therapists and doctors who value what they get here. They share it with their patients. They use it for themselves and take my courses. But I still get these mails from occasional therapists or psychiatrists going, how dare you? You have no qualifications to talk about how to heal. And I'm just are you freaking joking? Do you think that people who have themselves recovered have no qualification to talk to their peers about the path they followed? It's just such an arrogance. It really bothers me. It bothered me because this person I was talking to this morning on my coaching call, it's a group coaching call that we have for members. She really had just discovered what this is. And like so many of us, it's this incredibly freeing thing when you find out, so I'm not crazy, I'm not a bad person. The symptoms that I have are almost verbatim. They follow a very normal pattern for people who were abused and neglected when they were kids. So it's not crazy. It's normal. You're a normal person if you have these symptoms. So this is stuff ADHD type symptoms I mentioned, emotional dysregulation, endocrine disruption, higher rates of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, reproductive disorders. There's a whole realm of physiological disorders that are connected to a history of trauma. There's a high correlation between the amount of trauma you went through when you were a kid and how much you suffer from chronic disease, and things that have to do with a compromised immune system, compromised endocrine system, and difficulty just healing tissue. Your vital signs become dysregulated, out of sync when you're under stress, when you had this kind of background. I mean, to me, this was earth-shattering. It explained so much, so many of the things that afflict people who had abuse and neglect as a kid. You know, migraines, arthritis, asthma, sleep problems. So many of the things that I've suffered with are very common, classic. And when I was a kid, I had this, horrible stomach upsets all the time, especially when things were stressful. Go to the doctor, it was just always a great mystery to them. But now we know, and now there's no excuse not to know. And so I'm calling it tyranny. I'm calling it tyranny because every person has a right to expect their healthcare system to have basic knowledge about what this is. It would be terrible for them to be performing surgery but not understanding about infection prevention, right? Terrible things can happen when you don't know about that. So that was figured out a long time ago. But we have known for 10, 20 years that complex PTSD is a different animal. I'm still hearing all these professionals going, oh, that's just ADHD, that's just BPD, that's just, whining. And actually, it's a thing. It's a thing with a predictable pattern. It can be measured on a brain scan. Complex PTSD, it's a thing. So if you were abused and neglected as a kid, and I'm talking something new to you, please research. You can look at my channel, look online, complex PTSD, learn the signs of it. There's a lot of literature out there that's actually pretty unenlightened. You get these websites about health conditions, and they just say things, and it's not very up to date. The important thing to know is that trauma when you were a kid is highly correlated with the more trauma you had as a kid, the more likely that you have an autoimmune disease, the more likely it is that you have depression, anxiety, smoking, addiction. We knew, I mean, it's been common sense for a long time that traumatized people have a higher rate of addiction, tend to get depressed, tend to get anxious. That is understood. But cancer, diabetes, obesity, really, people didn't know that. So it's so important. This is a critical issue. I think traumatized people are the most expensive people in the healthcare system. So it is in their best interest to come up with treatments that work. But one sign that a treatment doesn't work is that healthcare systems don't fund it very well. And this is what I want to call out. This is going to be controversial for some of you. But there is poor evidence that talk therapy targets complex PTSD very well. Many talk therapists will tell you it does, but if you've ever noticed, if you have access, virtually, very few, a small percentage of people in the world could access therapy if they wanted to. That cannot be oh yeah, you just need therapy, right? It cannot be that. People need something they can manage themselves. It also can't be something that other people control. So I can't tell you how many messages I get from people who say, I'm desperate, I don't know what to do. I got diagnosed with CPTSD and now I have to wait months to see anybody, or even years in some cases, like in the UK, years to see somebody who can help you with CPTSD. Well, can they help you with CPTSD? And given that it's such an expensive problem to have, that so much chronic disease is associated with it, if they thought that what they had worked, I'm just going to ask, wouldn't they be giving it? So what I notice is, I used to work in healthcare for 30 years, services tend to be scant or withheld if they can't produce results. And the results that a healthcare system needs is people need to get better and they need to not be so expensive. So I'm asking that. Does it not behoove the mental health care system and healthcare system to figure out what actually helps reduce the dysregulation that in turn triggers all this symptoms and chronic disease that are so expensive for healthcare and that make our lives so difficult and hard? Should that not be of top priority? So I'm just saying, if anybody out there, are you a researcher? Come talk to me. I want to help. I want to help with this. I have simple self-managed solutions that I teach for free. I have this free course, The Daily Practice. You can take it, try it out, see what you think. See what you think. I've got over 100,000 people using these techniques right now, and I'm sure there are many who did not find it helpful, and I don't hear from them again, but I've got 100,000 people who have found it helpful, talking to me about it, coming back and saying this was life-changing for them. And I won't make any claims for the technique, but just that tools that you have in your hand that you can use as needed, which is how CPTSD is. You can't wait for, your Tuesday at 11 o'clock. You cannot wait for that and then once a week somebody doles out healing to you, which is normally done by talking about the past. All right, don't get me started on the past. Talking about the past, it's relevant. What happened is relevant. It can often help people to get a little validation. That happened to you? Well, that constitutes trauma, and that would explain why certain things are hard for you. But talking about the past is not itself the solution. It might be validation to go, okay, there's a reason why I struggle. But it's not itself the solution. And that is what was always presented to me when I used to go to therapy, is that, just keep coming back week after week, year after year, keep talking about it. And I kept thinking, well, I don't know, where is all this going? Am I going to have some big breakthrough because I talked about it? Am I going to have an insight? That's not where it came. And I'll tell you where it comes from. Everybody's healing, whether or not you have access to professional help, whether or not you find it incredibly great or not that great. Everybody needs to have a way to self-regulate. Everybody needs a way to self-regulate, to deal with the intense emotions that come up for traumatized people, to deal with that sense of discombobulation that can happen under stress. Do you ever get that? I had a really bad thing happen once. Somebody died. And in that week, twice, I drove away from a gas pump with the nozzle in my car and, yanked it out of the machine. I was dysregulated. At the time, that word was not in the vocabulary given to me about what was going on. People would say, oh, you're stressed or you're preoccupied. No, it's a neurological injury that comes from a history of trauma, that when a new trauma happens or any kind of stress, your left front cortex can start to go dim. That's where you should be reasoning. The right front starts to activate. That's where the emotions are. And all hell breaks loose. Life is very difficult to manage when you're having trouble reasoning and your emotions are quite strong. It's hard to make decisions. It's hard to set boundaries. It's hard to see a red flag and then act on seeing that red flag and stay away from that person. And this explains so much about why you see people who had trauma making these mistakes that just seem like dumb mistakes. I had somebody in the comment today, I gave them a bad time, and they said, this person just seems like dumb as a cat or something. Dumb as a chicken. That's what it was. Dumb as a chicken. Just kept going back to that guy. It's like, yeah, that's what trauma does. It's not because you're dumb, it's because you have a brain injury. And I just want to talk about human freedom. Like, a person cannot be free if they cannot control symptoms that are dominating their life and pushing them into a terrible situation, a terrible set of decisions that cause them to be impoverished, ostracized, and further abused. And the thing about abuse, for a person who doesn't heal, that will often, if that person has children, then the trauma is very easily passed on to the next generation. That does not have to happen. It doesn't have to happen. But we cannot pretend that the mental health care universe owns this issue and knows what to do and should always be consulted. I had this there's a major, website that deals with, adverse childhood experiences and trauma. And I was invited to post my blog posts there, and I would, and sometimes videos. And I put one up there about how it was a little bit about myths that have been perpetuated, that you should always be talking. And I wrote about my experience that talking about my trauma tends to be so dysregulating that I can't process information. I can't recover doing that. But what I can do is I can write my distressing thoughts. And I teach this very specific technique to write, daily practice. You can find that in the description section below. So I did a blog post about how, for me, writing about the troubling things and then perhaps reading to somebody was a way I could bypass the triggers. And I've since learned, yes, there is scientific backing for why that works. It's a different pathway for when you talk about trauma versus when you write about trauma and read what you wrote. You can bypass the trigger that makes talking about trauma so overwhelming and intense and dysregulating. So I was talking about that, and the editor of the publication said to me, oh, Anna, this is all well and good, something to that effect, but it's important to mention that nobody should use these techniques if they're not, when they're, except under the supervision of a licensed therapist. And I'm talking about writing fearful and resentful thoughts on paper and then meditating. Now I ask you, how realistic is it that even a rich person who has incredible access to therapy could refrain from meditating except under the supervision of a therapist? That's crazy talk. I think a lot of people on the front lines of healthcare probably have the best understanding of what trauma, how it plays out. They don't always have the training. I have a good relationship with my primary care doctor, and she lets me know like what she's being trained and kind of keeps me in the loop. Gradually it's coming that there's training, but what they're being trained to do is to screen for it because they know it affects health. So they screen, they ask the questions, but I was like, what is the intervention? And I don't think that institutionally there's a lot of solution out there. During the pandemic, do you remember what a shortage of therapists there was? And people were unable to get help at all. They were unable to get help. Certainly in my healthcare system, they were overwhelmed, unable to get help. A lot of their mental health workers were coming to me and saying, I'm so burned out and freaked out, I need help. Because they were, if they still were doing that work, they were getting so many clients, they couldn't handle it. And there's a loss of confidence that anybody feels when they feel like they can't make a difference. And so the people who have never been at the table before are the people like you and me who have CPTSD and who are using our minds and our experiences and researching to understand what works for us. It's a little different for each person, but what works for us. Now, if you say what works for you and you put it out there, you tell your doctor, do you get believed? Do you get respected? I did not always. I do now. But, I have this YouTube channel and things that back me up and make me look like I'm some kind of an expert. You're an expert too. You've been having to be your own therapist, your own doctor, your own parent. You had to take care of this stuff all your life. You have a lot of knowledge about what works for you, but sometimes it's that crucial piece of information that what's happening when you had trauma is quite often neurological dysregulation. Now, therapists and doctors will say, oh, I know about dysregulation, but what they mean is emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation is the kind other people can see, where we're overreactive, we're too angry, we're too sad, we fall in love too fast. That's emotional dysregulation. What they cannot see is the neurological dysregulation. So what you might feel when that's going on, you might feel discombobulated, a little like, I can't remember why I came in the room. I don't remember driving. I remember like getting started on this driving journey, but I don't remember crossing the bridge. And yet here I am across the bridge. You might feel numb in your nose or hands or face. You might walk into a room and just not know why you came in there. You might have trouble governing your energy or keeping track of time. It's dysregulation. It's a neurological injury. The first thing that is so helpful for healing, no matter what modality you're going to use, it's so important to know how to re-regulate, how to notice dysregulation signs and then bring it back in, get re-regulated. If you can live your life more regulated, more of the time, you're going to still get dysregulated sometimes. Everybody does. But if you can notice it and then get re-regulated as quickly as possible, your life is going to get so much better. And all the books in the world, all the talking in the world, all the drugs in the world, like nothing can reach you when your dysregulation is out of control. And people, they can't see what's going on with you. It doesn't look like much. So they see kids who are fidgety in class or can't focus, right? It's, I'm not a doctor or scientist, but I read, and it is, speculated by many researchers that some ADHD cases are really complex PTSD. And in a way, that's good news. CPTSD is probably more malleable. There's more you can do to heal. You have some control over these symptoms if you can start to zero in on them and work on them. It's not like you're not born with it. Another thing that it gets confused with is borderline personality disorder. These are two separate things, and I won't pretend to be able to diagnose borderline personality disorder, but there's clear evidence these are two separate things with some overlapping symptoms. There's overlapping symptoms between complex PTSD and autism, but they are distinctly not the same thing at all. Autism, is something you're born with. CPTSD is an injury. There are some symptoms that are similar, and it would be things like reading the social cues, being tuned in. With CPTSD, there's an injury to the ability to connect with other people, and that's going to manifest in many ways. And you probably have gone through your life with people thinking you're spaced out, you don't care, you're just too angry, you're too sensitive, right? You get called all this stuff. People think you have bad character. You just don't care. You just keep making the same mistake over and over again. That's me. And nobody understood, and that's why it's so incredibly empowering when you talk to other people with CPTSD and you read the research and you find out what is actually normal. What is a normal response to an abnormal event in your childhood or series of events? You're normal. And you can learn to start noticing and calming those symptoms, and then you begin to be on a level playing field with other people to start solving life's problems. And if you grew up with trauma and you've lived your life dysregulated, I know we get problems. There's money problems, relationship problems, not being able to get along, not feeling connected, joining groups but never feeling like a part of them, feeling like we have to isolate all the time. These are the common symptoms. It's a pattern, and you can learn to start treating those things. And that's, I had to heal myself, basically. I got a series of mentors. I did see 11 therapists in all over the years, and I would not say those have been helpful, but at least what it was helpful is just to say this isn't going anywhere. I got to do something different. So when I was going through a crisis, and the therapist and my primary care doctor were saying, you have got to take medication because the stress that you're going through. What was happening was, I now know I had complex PTSD from childhood underlying everything. I would sometimes be able to sort of keep that compartmentalized, but a bad thing happened. My partner died. I found him. I got total PTSD, tried to save him with CPR, very difficult, horrible experience, but it's the sort of experience that can give a person PTSD, and I got it. And that's actually well known. I was never diagnosed with it, and I saw the doctor, and then I saw a therapist. Go doctor, therapist, doctor, therapist. I was struggling. It was a year and a half later, and I just wasn't getting any better. And I was looping and looping and looping on the memory of finding this guy and trying to save him. And I would have to drive past the house where all of that happened, like every day. It was down the street from where I lived, and I was getting exhausted, and I mentioned to the doctor, I'm just tired all the time. I just feel so stressed out. And she was a good doctor, and she asked me, like, what's going on? And I told her, I keep looping on this thing that happened, and I can't stop thinking about it. And every time I do, my heart starts pounding, and, I just get full of adrenaline. And she was like, oh, well, we have to medicate that. That was her solution to that. Well, I had PTSD. PTSD does not tend to respond to medication all that well. Not everybody knows or respects that, but some people respond to medication for things. PTSD, not so much. And what I've learned about it from my own experience is that healing that depends so much on becoming aware, like, when am I getting dysregulated? When are the symptoms kind of activating and kicking up? And then using my tools to bring it back down. And what happens is, if you're drunk or high, and yes, the research shows that even on, psychoactive mental health medications, it can inhibit that process of learning to re-regulate. So medication is often like, it's for situations that must be dealt with. And so learning to re-regulate may not be in the cards at that time. But in time, to really learn how to re-regulate, you kind of need all your senses. You need to feel the little edges of those negative feelings. I say this with full understanding. Some people, they don't need to feel it. They need professional help. They need medical help. But for the vast number of people who are just struggling with some old traumas, learning to re-regulate is the most powerful thing they can do to support whatever else they're doing. Some people do somatic body methods. Some people do talk therapy. Some people are under the care of a psychiatrist. Some people are doing martial arts. Some people are in 12-step programs. Some people are in a combination of all of that. But none of it is any good if you can't stay regulated and hold your focus and be able to, keep your adrenaline level down and process information. That's what I'm saying. So I was angry. I was angry that this woman had suffered for 4 long years, and she was under all this care. They had medicated her to the gills. She was sick and tired of it. And I can't speak to whether she needed that or not. She didn't feel that she did. But no one had ever used the phrase complex PTSD to her. She didn't know about it. It was just treated like this was some random thing wrong with her without considering what had happened to her. I believe that every person needs to be sovereign over their healing. Sovereign means you are the queen, you are the king, you are in charge of your healing. We consult professionals for help. In rare cases, we are incapacitated because of a debilitating condition physically or in mental health, where somebody has to make decisions for us. But other than that, we must be in charge of our healing. And what bothers me is the mindset that gets propagated is you can't even work on this or help other people or talk about it unless you're under the supervision of these magical people who were educated and licensed in this thing that still doesn't formally recognize CPTSD. Well, I challenge that. I stand up to you. We must do that for ourselves. We must learn to support each other. We must learn to re-regulate. Healing is really only possible. There's a little bit of healing you can do in isolation, but ultimately it's your connection with other people. It's identifying, yes, what happened, but then what am I doing? What are the behaviors that are defeating me and sabotaging my healing right now? We start to work on those. That is something that I found very hard to get help with from professionals, was my moral failings, the terrible mistakes of dishonesty and unfairness to other people that I was doing. It's the stuff that we talk about our parents doing to us, but there's this weird like firewall where we go, they did all this bad stuff, but we are just, the victims of this. But actually, every single person has these problems where we have moral failings and we need help changing them. We need help not being verbally abusive to people, not violating, commitments in our marriages and relationships or in other people's marriages. We need help respecting children and not creating drama for them. That's what I mean, to have moral healing, to do the right thing, to recognize the right thing, even though you weren't taught this at home as a kid. There's a place where you can learn that. And these are challenging times. I think people used to get that in church. Some still do. But, as we know, like so many of our institutions, including churches, there's corruption, there's lying. People don't know who to trust. So here's what we do here. We come together and we grow in our own trustworthiness so that we can support others. That's what we do at Crappy Childhood Fairy. It's one person putting out a hand to another and we help out. And I see this also in 12-step programs. One person does the best they can and they give a hand to the person who hasn't quite come as far as them. But in the end, that's what we're working out. And that is what you'll find in 12-step programs, is like Crappy Childhood Fairy, there's an opportunity to work on where you have made mistakes and where you want to change your own behavior. And for people who know that this is where they're self-sabotaging, I think this comes as delicious information like, yes, how do I do that, right? And you can't. Go down in the links below if you want to know. I have courses, I have coaching programs for you. That's what we work on, re-regulation and then solving the life problems that are so common for people like us. But how we solve those problems is we have to start recognizing, is it just me or am I being unfair to this person? All these letters that people send me, that's almost always the question. Am I being a jerk or do I need to set a boundary with this person? Am I just being clingy or is this person treating me badly? Growing up with somebody who didn't properly parent you, without that teaching of how do you be a good person? What is the right way to act? How do you recognize a fellow good person? When I first started Crappy Childhood Fairy, it was a blog and the initial name was Feral Girls Guide. I thought it would just be for women. And I used the word feral because that's how I felt about myself. Like I had just not learned 80% of what you have to know to be an adult. I didn't know. I literally didn't know how to use a knife and a fork together. Okay, I grew up in a very hippie environment and I didn't learn that till I was older. I didn't know when to apologize. I didn't know why you need to be really honest about things. I just sort of like, okay, here's a story. We moved to another state, and I went to this school that was very old-fashioned compared to the one that I had gone to previously. In my previous school, if all the kids got in trouble for something and the teacher said, who did this? We would all lie. That's just what we did. In my new school, it was this strange new thing. So everybody had been acting up when the teacher went out to go to the bathroom. She came back and things had been thrown. And she said, "That's it? Who did this?" And so I was one of the kids who did it, but I lied. I was just like, I didn't do it. Everybody else who did it, they said, I did it. And I instinctively knew, like, I love this. I love people telling the truth. This is so comforting to me. I was so confused from growing up. My family had alcoholism. So alcoholism almost always involves a lot of BS, just a lot of like pretending you're okay to people, denying why mommy is asleep. There's a lot of like lies. And you end up recruited to participate in the lie, and you end up really unable to detect the difference. And I think what's happened in our culture is in an effort to help people who are really like downtrodden, poor, left out, that sometimes we just try to make it so, there's no culpability. You're never responsible for yourself. And you're not supposed to say personal responsibility. Like that has all these associations of like the army and, or extremism or something. But personal responsibility just means it's just the acknowledgement that though it's not my fault that I was traumatized as a kid, nobody is coming to save me. That if anybody's going to change my life, it's going to have to be me. And it might as well be me. And so for me, I benefit from my relationships to the people around me. I don't live on an island, but I can't even have relationships with people around me if I can't have a basic amount of healing from trauma. So I just hear a lot of talk. And what I think happened is people who work on the front lines of healthcare tend to know a lot more realistically what goes on with people. Although we're all capable of drinking Kool-Aid, we get very ideological. We think there's one way, it's never this, it's always that. Don't hold your kids, always hold your kids. There's all this like ideology about how to do things, and obviously instinct and common sense have to play a role. But the public health sector, I think, and I've worked in public health for a long time in the past, and I've seen this happen in other areas besides trauma. But what happens, public health is largely funded and rewarded by funding, either grant funds from philanthropists or government funds. And what gets funded tends to be things that are popular. In trauma, I'll tell you what's a lot more popular than helping us is helping children. And I think there's common sense to that. If you could avert trauma for kids, that would be amazing. It would be amazing if you could have a world where there was no more trauma. There are, in fact, organizations who claim they are eliminating trauma. And to that, I think that's really unrealistic. I think that's grandiose, in fact. And I think it sounds good, but it is human nature to do what rewards us. And so if you're an organization who works in trauma and you get funding, if you make audacious claims like we're going to end trauma, or you make audacious claims like, we're going to solve this problem and therefore you'll never have that problem. Oh my gosh, it's always so complicated, isn't it? But what you see in healthcare and then also this sort of like philanthropy funded sector is always the locus of control is on the sort of caregiver, the practitioner. And they say the word empowerment, but empowerment is always something they give to people. And I can feel the self-congratulation in that word empowerment. What I consider empowerment is it's a thing that only comes from within. Your power comes from within, and your power comes from within when you heal, when you are not suppressed and oppressed by your own symptoms and by a system that seems to kind of like your symptoms and keep ignoring them and throwing solutions at you that don't help and not measuring themselves and not rethinking, hey, you know what? The suicide rate just is going up and up. The depression rate is going up and up. Maybe we're not on the right track with this stuff. Diabetes is very closely, it's a common chronic illness that is highly correlated with trauma. So if that's the case, I could see this idea like we're going to end trauma and then there won't be diabetes. But what about the people like us who are already adults? We can actually calm other symptoms, our endocrine, diabetes, hypertension, depression, anxiety, addiction. All of these things are helped when we address the dysregulation. Not just the ideological story, not the socioeconomic story. That's all part of it, sure. But what we can change is our awareness of our symptoms and learn to bring those triggers and those symptoms down so that we are able to pay attention to what's going on and have actual choices, and to be tuned into ourselves and our environment enough to say, I tried something And it helped. This thing helped. When something helps you, it's good to keep going with it. When it doesn't help you, please stop attacking yourself or thinking there's something wrong with you. It doesn't help you. So I was angry today, and I wanted to say this, and I've often refrained from being so opinionated, but it really bothered me that somebody could go 4 years suffering in a very serious state of depression and never be told about CPTSD. When your past trauma is doing the thinking for you, it loves to point fingers at all the bad things that happened to you. It can't stand looking at the ways that maybe your own actions and thinking right now may be sabotaging your healing. Because that's the biggest obstacle to healing complex PTSD. It's not your parents, though they probably had a lot to do with why you have CPTSD. And it's not your partner, it's not your therapist or lack of a therapist, even though a therapist may also have influence over your healing. The biggest obstacle, in my experience, is self-sabotage, because when you're undermining yourself, it doesn't matter what else is going on or what help you're getting. Your healing gets blocked. And it's really normal. Self-sabotage isn't just this bad thing we do. It's part of having CPTSD. It's part of it. For example, you might block your own healing with self-defeating behaviors. We all do it sometimes. And up to a point, we can probably keep making progress anyway. But the fact is, a lot of people with CPTSD are walking around not healing, still being stuck, getting more stuck, more disconnected, more angry, and more suppressed from ever becoming happy or fulfilled or becoming the person they were meant to be. So there are things you can do right now to start changing the direction of your life. And in this video, I want to talk about the ways you might be self-sabotaging your own healing and teach you what to do to stop doing that. Okay, are you ready? All right, the first thing, and this one's been made harder for you lately, but it's time to stop isolating. And if you're like most people with CPTSD, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you get triggered by other people, and it can be really hard to show up with an open heart and an open mind in social situations and to make the kind of connection with other people that supports healing. There's this huge temptation to pull back from other people, and you might be isolating overtly and hide out in your house, or you might be isolating covertly and then acting like you're available and friendly, but secretly avoiding invitations and personal openness and commitments with other people. But whether it's overt or covert, the result is the same. You end up alone. And as much as you may find it hard, you need other people in the mix to be reflecting back to you and interacting with you so that you can progress in your healing. And isolation is funny. It's caused by trauma and it causes trauma. And I know a bunch of you are going to say isolating is the only way to stay safe from the kind of mistreatment you went through in the past. And in one way, you're right. If you don't have contact with people, you can't be mistreated. But you also can't heal, really. So there comes a time, if you're going to stop sabotaging yourself, that you've got to stop causing trauma and let people in a little bit. And what I suggest to you is that you titrate. Titrate, that's a word I've borrowed from the medical world, and it means to just do a tiny bit at a time and see how you do, and then do another tiny bit. And you can make this easier and help yourself get stronger and more flexible around people if you can, and at the same time, learn to calm those triggers. And if you want a way to do that, you can go take my free course. There's a link to it below this video and all my videos. It's called Free Tools. It's a page on my website. The Free Tools page is always linked down below in the description section. And it teaches you 2 simple techniques you can use every day to have less fear, less anger, and to become just more free to connect with people and have fun and be yourself. That's the object of the game. Okay, so the second thing you're doing that's sabotaging your healing is staying stuck in your sad stories. And I know that it is sad, and I know you were told that telling these stories and exploring them and feeling your feelings about them, that if you could just do it enough times and for enough years, that someday you would feel better. And if it worked and you're just sitting here watching this video about how to stop sabotaging your healing, but now let your story be less about what happened to you and more about you now and all that you're doing with your life. Now, there's definitely a time and a place to talk about what happened. And it can be very healing when it's the right time and in the right measure. But I have not found that talking and talking and talking about it kept delivering returns. It needs to be acknowledged and shared, for sure. But also, we need to feel better today and to create a life that we like. And we want to connect with other people, to love and be loved by them. And the thing is, when the sad stories are dominating your life and your consciousness and your identity, you can't really do that. You're not present. You can't really pay attention to the lovely person who might be right in front of you. We don't always have good boundaries around the sad stories. And to be honest, that can make us feel very negative to be around. So I'm not telling you to deny what happened, but if you've talked it to death and you still feel like your healing is stuck, maybe all that talking has turned into self-sabotage. And it's time to focus on you now in ways that you can start making things better in your work, in your relationships, and in your sense of meaning. Those are totally important. Okay, the third thing to do if you want to stop self-sabotaging is to stop the angry outbursts of negative emotions. Now, I know you have things to feel angry about. You do. And what happened to you can't be erased. But there's an anger that's common with CPTSD that can be made monster-sized when you're overwhelmed or when you're feeling threatened, pounding pillows when you're angry, venting, screaming. Was that ever suggested to you? Well, some researchers at Iowa State University have showed what some of us always suspected about that, or what we noticed in our own experience. It not only doesn't reduce anger, it makes it worse. So nothing will destroy your relationship and your career and your mental health faster than lashing out from that traumatized place. Now, if you were traumatized as a kid, I know, and I don't even have to explain this to you, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you've done it. It's almost certainly been done to you, and it's poison. So yes, there are reasons to be angry. There are present-day things that might make you legitimately angry. So yes, there are reasons to be angry. There are present-day things that might make you legitimately angry when you're insulted or cheated, that kind of thing. And there were past things that happened that weren't fair, that you feel damaged you or robbed you of wholeness, that you worry that you never can find or replace. And I don't blame you for having anger, but here's the thing. What happened to you can never be totally set right because it's past. You can't change the past. And so your healing depends ultimately on you facing that reality, doing what you can about it, and then with every bit of strength that you have, to use your energy to forge a good and happy life. Your happiness doesn't depend on getting revenge or getting an apology. You probably will never have those things, but you can become happy by not damaging your life anymore. You can be happy by blossoming into your real self, being you, using your talents and developing your gifts so that you can work and give love and serve the world in the unique way that only you can. We can do it in 1,000 ways, but we need to be useful. That is a need we have as humans. And from there, the anger has a way of working itself out of your heart, out of your mind, out of your cells, so that you can be free. Okay, the fourth thing to stop doing is to stop being in bad relationships. And I know it's easier said than done. We are way inside the easier said than done land when I say that, but I'm going to tell you straight, if you're going to heal, you've got to stop being in abusive, chaotic, disrespectful, non-mutual, and breadcrumb relationships. To keep seeking them out, it's just like the definition of insanity, right? So staying in them is also something terrible. I would say staying in a relationship like that is spiritual death. When you know something is killing you or harming the other person, but you stay anyway, there's an injury to your integrity and your self-respect that will sabotage anything else that you're trying to do in your life. Are there reasons to stay? Children, illness come to mind. I'm not going to list them all here, but I'm suggesting you look at the fact, and I know you know this, that when you believe that you have no choice but to stay in an abusive, exploitive, or damaging relationship, it's probably your past trauma talking. And for you to heal, some stronger part of you needs to rise up and see the situation for what it is and get you out of there. The fifth thing you want to get free of is a tendency to run away from challenges and opportunities. Sometimes it seems like it's going to feel so good. And how many times have you turned away from a potentially good thing, a job, a relationship, telling someone how you feel about them, because you had to fear that your CPTSD symptoms would just rise up and destroy you if you did it wrong, if you messed up, or if you realized it was a bad idea or you got rejected. Putting ourselves out there and living our lives always involves the risk of failure. And the horrible thing about living with dysregulation and CPTSD is that failure is a risk we feel that we can't afford. And I'm not going to give you some personal development pep talk that you just have to be tough or strong or believe in yourself. You are tough, but what's needed to cope with failure and to not sacrifice everything to avoid is a way to offload that tsunami of emotion just enough that you're actually okay with what's happening. That's the secret. When your CPTSD is totally untreated and you're dysregulated and life is shaky, no, you can't afford to lose anything, so you don't try. But when you're active in the process of healing and when you're supported by a friend or two or three who know what your challenges are, who know why it's so worth it for you to keep taking your next brave steps, when you know how to calm your triggers, you can afford to take the risk. The only way to grow and learn is to try things. And the only way to bear the possibility that most of what you try isn't going to work out, it's just to embrace yourself as somebody who tries and to have a really good way to find ease inside when it is hard. And it can be hard out here when there's ease in here. That's what you didn't used to have now, but you can have ease inside. Is it possible to be addicted to a person? Toxic relationships are not technically a substance, but the behaviors they can drive you toward look very much like a substance addiction. When it's happening to you, it's almost like you're under a spell and you know you should get away from the person and forget about them, but one little bit of contact with them can start the whole destructive cycle over again. So this is another form of what is called limerence, and that's the name for an infatuation or an obsession for someone who's not actually with you, or not entirely anyway. And a lot of people have asked if you can have limerence for someone who you actually do have some kind of relationship with. And so I wanted to share the story here of someone I'll call Martin. And here's what he says. About a year ago, I met a woman I'll call Angela. We entered into a relationship pretty quickly, and it was very intense by my standards. We've been broken up now for several months, and I'm still suffering. The relationship was only good for about 3 months, but I think I'm experiencing a trauma bond, and the relationship has the markings of emotional abuse and perhaps narcissism, though I'm hesitant to label or diagnose, and I hoped you could help. Before I met Angela, I had a feeling about the kind of relationship I wanted to have. I wanted a partnership with someone who wanted to grow together, and this was kind of new for me. In the past, I used to just approach relationships with a see how it goes attitude, but there was never a goal. And for the record, I'm a divorced father of 2, and my past relationships, even though they didn't work out in the end, were pretty good. With Angela, I went into it knowing I wanted a lasting relationship, and she let me know pretty early that she was on board. There was a lot of synchronicity. It felt magical. We were texting all day, every day, having video chats and spending a lot of time together where we talk about the future. Within 3 months, we were talking about collaborations on business ventures and perhaps even moving in together in the near future. About this time, we went on a trip together and everything suddenly changed practically overnight. We had been at a big festival and I had to leave and go home, and she stayed longer. Before I left, she said that she could feel herself withdrawing and something about sabotaging the relationship and that I would be more hurt than she would be. I asked her what she meant, if she meant we should break up or something, and she deflected and talked about plans to move in together in the future. After I got home, I got a call from her, and she said she didn't want to be in a relationship anymore. She said she wasn't relationship material. I said, so we're breaking up then? And she said, whoa, stop thinking in such extreme terms. She said, that is linear thinking. She went away to her folks' place for a while, and I thought, well, we're not broken up yet. Let's just see what happens. Now, this is where I get mad at myself. The whole dynamic went on through the summer, where we weren't broken up, but we weren't in a relationship. Her communication at this time was cold, the total opposite of the first 3 months. I knew it wasn't healthy for me, but when I would start to pull away, she'd want me back. She called me from a cafe and blamed all of this on her avoidant attachment disorder. She said I was the love of her life and apologized, and said she wanted to heal and grow together again. So then I'd take her back thinking, well, if she's aware of this attachment issue, maybe we can work with it. And then as soon as I'd get back into it, the cold communication started again. For example, when we were at the festival, she had uploaded a lot of photos that were taken of us together there. She put them on her Facebook page. It didn't really bother me, except that there was no communication with me about it. And then when she had that flip happen, when she turned cold again, she took all the photos down. Then later she'd put them all up again, still not communicating with me, and then take them down again. And through all of this, there was no communication. And I asked her at one point, why did she take the photos of me down? And she said, well, they gave the impression that we're in a relationship, and we're not. Another time over the summer, those photos came up again, and she denied that she ever put them up and took them down again. The worst thing about all of this is the confusion. Yeah. That's just one example of back and forth, but it went on for months, and that's why I get angry at myself. I feel like I betrayed myself, and I enabled her. If she saw me pulling away again, she'd send me a playlist with love songs. She told me once that she was afraid I'd leave her, and so while she was away, she started a journal of her uninhibited thoughts and promised to send them to me or to give them to me when she got back into town. And of course, that never happened. She came back, but never spoke about the journal again. By this time, I felt like any attempt to communicate with her was going to just be confusing. I never knew who was going to show up. I told her I needed time alone, and I made that clear. The word breakup did come up. It was brought up by both of us, but first by me. She said, "Is that what's happening?" And I nodded. I circle things that I want to come back to when I'm going to read the letter again, and we're going to come back and talk about parts of this. So she looked sad, and I asked for no contact and for her to just let me be, to let me be in my power, to let me be grounded, to not be confused, to connect with my soul again, to connect with the feeling I had before we met. The next morning, she sent me a selfie because she was starting a new job. And I texted her to say, "You look good. They're lucky to have you, but please, no more contact." She waited 2 days and said, "I'll wait for you to contact me." Then she sent a little sad face emoji and another and another. And within a couple more days, she just started flooding me with texts incessantly and trying to call using guilt. It was all about her. She said, "I'm trembling inside. Please have some compassion." She wanted to meet to come get some kind of closure with me. When I didn't respond at all, her tactic went from guilt to anger and then rage. She started smearing me on Facebook. It may be going on still, but we've blocked each other. After a couple months, though, I sent her a letter explaining my timeline, how I understood what happened between us, that it seemed like she felt entitled to me and she didn't have to respond, but I wished her the best. She didn't respond for more than a week, and when she did, she said, "I received your letter and I will answer it soon." I didn't expect anything, but maybe a month later she called and said, "I'm just calling to tell you I will not be answering your letter." But the texts started again. "Come on, we're friends. Show some compassion and be there for me." And my problem is, I want so badly to answer her texts. It's like an alcoholic who wants to take a drink. If I text her, I'll be hooked again. I've come so far getting over her, but if I connect again, it'll be like starting from day one. What I really want is that feeling that I had before we met. I know how I want it to feel, and I've learned what to look out for. I was stronger in my boundaries in the beginning, and then it all got lost. But I'm getting stronger now. I'd love to meet someone really wonderful and live our lives together, but I haven't quite gotten free of the pull of this woman I know is out there. I can't get over it. I don't even know what to grieve. The woman I thought I loved, the relationship I thought we had, or the person I was before she met me. How can I heal and get free so that I can move on with my life and never get pulled down like that again? Martin. So this letter, this is a hard one. Just reading this, I feel my energy like sucked out of me. That's how this story affects me. And I think this might be something like what you're feeling, Martin, and why you're having trouble disengaging from this, because it feels like you ought to be able to get your energy back. Like it got taken away from you from this woman, and maybe you could somehow get it back. Let's go through what you wrote. About a year ago, I met a woman I'll call Angela. We entered into a relationship pretty quickly. All right, for people who have had trauma as a kid, and I know you had a separate story about that, which I didn't cover here, going quick is one of the fastest ways to have a relationship that sort of brings up all of our stuff. And so if you've watched any of my videos, and I think you have, you know that I'm always advocating, like, slow it down, slow it down. But by the time I'm getting letters from people, they're usually in something that brought up all the old stuff. And so here we are, and that's fine. So you got in quickly, and it was very intense. And now you've been broken up for several months, but you're still suffering. The relationship was only good for about 3 months, and you think you're experiencing a trauma bond. I think so too. And the relationship has markings of emotional abuse. I think so too. And perhaps narcissistic traits. I think so too. I don't know if we would diagnose anyone here. We don't have to. We can just say that the traits are there. So before you met her, you had a feeling about the kind of relationship you wanted to have. So you were in touch with yourself. You say, I wanted a partnership with someone who wanted to grow together. And this was kind of new for me. In the past, I used to just approach relationships with a see how it goes attitude. So you used to just kind of cast it to the wind. And that's kind of a CPTSD thing too. The pattern that I notice in your letter is that in a lot of what you're going through, you have given away the power and your fate to another person. And a little bit, I could just hear there's sort of a fog of denial that actually you're the one with agency. You're the one who decides. So you would see how it goes, but that's sort of, in this case, knowing what I know from this letter, I would say you're waiting to see, like, how does the woman feel about it? So when you lose your power like that, it's an extremely vulnerable place. A lot of people say, oh, I attract narcissists. And I always say, well, it doesn't really matter who we attract. What matters is who we end up getting together with. And so for somebody who's very selfish and wants to use somebody to fill in some gap in their life, but not actually care about them as a person, which is kind of the story I'm hearing in this letter, that's how she treated you. Well, that becomes possible when they find someone who's just going to sit around and wait and see what they do, and it doesn't really have a boundary or a set of standards for themselves. You have standards, but they got wobbly here around her, and I can only guess she must be very dazzling. I don't know, beautiful, talented, charming, fun. So a lot of great things happened there to sort of draw you in. But then it's a foggy world where you have no defenses. That's the feeling I get about this relationship. So you didn't have a goal in previous relationships. And for the record, you're a divorced father of 2. Cool. Having kids puts extra premium on having a healthy relationship, if you have one at all, because it's so important for the kids, right? To model that for them. So fantastic that you're not in this relationship anymore, and that's not going to influence the kids any more than it may have already. And that your past relationships have been pretty good, even if they didn't work out. But with Angela, you went in knowing what you wanted. She let you know she was on the same page. She wanted a big future, big, long-term committed relationship that you would grow together. Sounds really good. And then you got really enmeshed. You were texting all day, every day. When people fall in love, they do that. When it has a sort of dark side to it, that's when we call it enmeshed. And so even the most pure love, when it doesn't have any oxygen from the outside world, when you're just completely into each other, texting all day, every day, video chats, talking about moving in together, getting together, and always being about the future, that's really vulnerable. And so, Martin, I know that you're, hoping to meet somebody great. And so just as I go through this, one tip I'm going to give you here is when you are dating, be very careful about talking about the future. The future is something you could really, I always suggest to people, like, if you have a criteria, like, I'm looking to get married, I have kids, and you would be their step parent. Those are things that kind of need to be floated out there fairly early in the dating relationship. But talking about the future and trying to imagine it and construct it especially if you have attachment wounds or trauma, or one of your parents or both of them were very neglectful to you. It can be a really vulnerable thing. It can be prone to fantasy and limerence. So even though you're sitting with a real person right in front of you, you're interacting with a fantasy person. And I would say this person was interacting with some kind of fantasy of her own. I don't know her, and she hasn't written in, and she can't speak for herself here. But something's going on there. Some people call it future faking. You know, I want to move in with you. It turned out very quickly that wasn't at all where she was coming from. But that's one of the reasons why going slowly, because, you know, just because we have CPTSD, we will often find ourselves kind of having a romantic involvement with someone who doesn't have those boundaries, who leaps into the future, who's not really capable of building a relationship and building commitment and building a real, true friendship, where deciding to live together would happen at an organic time after you actually knew if you were compatible and wanted a future together. I think, you know, when you get to be north of 40 and younger, really, moving in together becomes, you know, many of us have had the experience that it's not easily undone. It's something to take extremely seriously. Some people just don't even do it. They either get married or they live separately. It's a complicated kind of commitment. It has a certain open-endedness to it, and yet your livelihood, your home, everything becomes like wrapped up in the relationship. And if you have that wound inside and you have that fear of abandonment going on, having your home wrapped up with an unreliable person and your money and your social circle and all that stuff, it's just too much to lose. And you could end up clinging to a bad relationship much longer than you should, or losing it altogether because the person leaves you. Well, we can tolerate a certain amount of that in life, but if you've had a traumatic life, I really wish for you to have a slowly unfolding romance where maybe you date several people to see who the one is, and then a slow unfoldment of one who turns out to be like a really good person for you to be with, which you could discover in certainly no less than a year. Usually more like a year and a half, 3 years would be a normal, healthy time to be dating somebody before you decide to stake everything on them. And especially because you're kids. What's great about kids is you can think about what's good for the kids. What's good for the kids is good for you. So just as it would not be good for them to have some partner of yours sort of come in and leave, or a bunch of drama, it's not good for you either. So this is where the story gets odd and hard for you. About this time you went to a big festival and everything suddenly changed. It was like overnight, just boom. So you were going to move in together, everything was so great. Then when you had to leave and she stayed, and she said some weird thing about feeling like she was withdrawing and maybe it was over, and you're just, you know, and then she denied when you said, "Are we broken up?" She's just like, "What are you talking about? No, we're moving in together." Very confusing. Very, you know, right there, the red flags are just starting to like, it's a red alert. Okay, after I got home, I got a call from her. She said she didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. She said she wasn't relationship material. By the way, when people say that, even though sometimes that's a cover for something else that they don't want to tell you, like perhaps what might be the case here is she met somebody else. But it means they're not. When somebody wants to be with you, how you'll know is because they are with you, because they don't want to risk losing you, okay? And so they don't mess around with scaring you or saying they're not relationship material. They're going to put on their best behavior and try to impress you. So then you said, "So we're breaking up," and she said, "Whoa, stop thinking in such extreme terms." And she said, "I was linear thinking." Okay, this is hallmark. Everybody gets mad when I say this. There can be all kinds of ideological and spiritual abuse, but accusing you of linear thinking is a kind of ideological abuse or maybe spiritual abuse. Like, you know, when monogamy is expected and had been promised, and you're accused of being too much in your head or thinking too linearly, it's like more red flags, red alert. You're not too linear of a thinker by asking, "Are we broken up?" when she says she doesn't want to be in a relationship with you. So this is just like all out gaslighting here and saying you're too linear, you're too extreme. And it sounds like, I'm just going to read between the lines here. Well, I'll read about the next part here about the Facebook pictures. Then she went away to her folks, and you thought, well, we're not broken up yet, so let's just see what happens. And I circled that, Martin, because you said that in the past you used to have this let's just see how it goes attitude and no goal. So this is the point where you really surrendered your goal, and you're just like, well, let's just see if she comes around and wants to be with you. And at this point, I think if you were stronger and more healed inside, you'd be going, F this person. They're being awful and inconsistent and blowing hot and cold and saying terrible things and accusing you of being too linear, that you want to know if you're in a relationship or not. At that point, I think that would be, it's a pretty obvious time to break up with somebody, but you think, let's just see what happens. And maybe you mean, like, let's just see what your heart tells you. But how this story plays out, I just see you getting tossed around on this stormy sea of this other person and her whims for you. And that her whims for you have everything to do about what's convenient for her and never anything to do with how you might feel. And I'm guessing that there was a precedent for that in your childhood, that people did not take seriously what you needed and things were all about them. All right. So then you said, this is where you get mad at yourself. Good, healthy anger. The whole dynamic went on through the summer where you weren't broken up, but you weren't together. How convenient for her, right? Her communication at this time was cold, the total opposite of the first 3 months. I knew it wasn't healthy for me, but when I would start to pull away, she'd want me back. Surprise, surprise. Yep. She wanted you not here, not gone. She wanted you right about here. You know, probably for not evil reasons, but that's just kind of where she wanted you, and she knew that wouldn't work for you. And so, you know, she just kept saying, she just fed you what you wanted to hear so that you would stick around. It's nice to have somebody kind of waiting in the wings for you. It sounds very much, though, like she wanted to appear single for one or more other people and just keep you kind of as a backup insurance policy. And that's very harsh to say, but that is definitely what I'm sort of detecting here. All right. You knew it wasn't healthy for you. No, it wasn't. But when you pull away, she'd do it again, just pull you back in. And she called you from a cafe, and she blamed all of this on her avoidant attachment disorder. You know, maybe that there's certainly signs of that, but it sounds like it's something even worse. And I'm not a therapist or a clinician of any kind, but what I know about avoidant attachment disorder is, it's all about avoidance. So this, like, getting all enmeshed and pulling together, that suggests that there's something else going on. So she said you were the love of her life, and she apologized, and she said she wanted to heal and grow together. Those are like the magic words for you, right? I want to heal and grow together, because that was your ideal, and she knew that. And so that you'd take her back. And you did. And you were thinking, well, now if she's aware she has this issue, maybe we can work with it. And I totally get it. You know, I was in a relationship with a guy who had a terrible drug addiction, and he said, I'm so sorry, I'm going to go to treatment, and he got into treatment, and I thought, see, so as long as he's actually in treatment, there's hope for us. But, obviously our two cases are very different, but in that case, when I look back, I just say, even if he was utterly sincere, which he wasn't, he was doing it just so I wouldn't leave, even if he had been utterly sincere, it's a long road for somebody who's that dysfunctional to actually heal enough to become a person who would be good to be in a relationship with, whether it's drugs or whether it's this just like crazy back and forth deception and inconsideration and selfishness. So let's just say it's not like some kind of a personality disorder or anything. It's the facts. This is how she acts. And I just wouldn't recommend to anybody, and I don't want for you. You're just like a dear person. You want love. I just don't wish this on you at all, for somebody to treat you like that. But I get it, how the trauma bonding, as you mentioned, for anybody watching, trauma bonding it's like a psychological phenomenon. It could happen to anybody, not just traumatized people, where when somebody's like, I love you, I love you, I love you, and then they're like, I'm not talking to you, and then I love you, I love you, I love you, and then I'm not talking to you. It like hooks something in our brains. It just gets us hooked in. It gets us obsessed with when am I going to get the next, cookie of affection, of acknowledgement, of touch, of talking and contact. It can make a person obsessed. It can make a person addicted. Okay, so then you give us the example of the cold communication, which is that when you were at the festival, she put a bunch of pictures of you guys up on Facebook without asking you. And I'd say in a new relationship, Yeah, you're supposed to ask. It's a very public thing to do, and especially if you tag them, it goes on their page, and it's like announcing, like, hey, I'm the girlfriend of this guy. So, what some people might call a pissing match. And it didn't bother you. You were okay to be public, except it was weird that she didn't talk to you. Correct. Then when her whole personality flipped, when she turned cold again, she took all the photos down. Then she put them back up there again and then take them down again. And through all of this, there was no communication. You asked her at one point why she did it, and she said, well, they gave the impression that we were in a relationship and we're not. Okay, so Martin, this is the hardest tough love moment of this. Why would somebody at a festival take pictures down? It's so that they can appear available to somebody else. I am getting a strong sense there was somebody else, or many people. I doubt it was like the love of her life or anything worked out great, because she's very erratic with this stuff. But putting you up there without talking to you is, lots of people do it. It's normal. But that thing where she doesn't talk to you and throws it up there and wants to create an impression, it's all about how other people see her. That's what I'm saying. How you feel about having the pictures put up, how you feel about having them taken down, don't matter to her. They would matter to anybody, both things, putting them up, taking them down. It speaks a lot, and anybody would have feelings about that she doesn't care, and that she later denied that she ever put them up and down. Okay, that's BS, okay? That's not cool. That's a utter self-centeredness, and she seems to be completely driven about how other people see her and doesn't want to appear to be in a relationship, and there's only one reason why people do that. The worst of it, you say, is the confusion. That was just one example of the sort of back and forth of hot and cold. It went on for months, and that's why you get angry at yourself, which I understand. You feel like you betrayed yourself, and yes, but I understand how that happened. It could happen to any of us, really. It has. And you enabled her. I guess so. Yeah, you could call it that. If she saw you pulling away again, she'd send you a playlist with love songs. She told you once she was afraid that she'd get left, and so while she was away, she started a journal of all her uninhibited thoughts. I'm guessing that's some sort of sexy thing, and promised to send it to you or give it to you when she got back into town. Man, what a manipulative hook. Basically, like if somebody was an alchemist and tried to take a man's brain and just put a giant gaffing hook in it and go, just yank it, but then just throw it aside, I'd say that's how to do it, That would be how to do it. So it never happened. She came back. It was never spoken about again. But this time, you felt like any attempt to communicate with her was going to be confusing, and you were right, Martin. You never knew who was going to show up, and so that's interesting. Yeah, just like a totally unstable personality there. I'm sure not going to be surprised if she was traumatized too, but just because we're traumatized doesn't give us the right to trample all over other people. It may give us difficulty in relationships. It may cause our personalities to go out of control. I know lots of people struggle with mental illness, but that still doesn't make it okay to abuse people emotionally. Everything that you suspected here, narcissistic traits, emotional abuse, and trauma bond, I think you're right. I think your perception is accurate, and I just want to validate that. Sometimes just having that validated by someone who gets it is enough to just help you go, okay, and wash that person out of your hair. I love that song. I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair. And there's a time for that, isn't there? So get ready. Get that shower warming up, Martin. It's time. It's coming time. Let's read the rest of the letter. Okay. I told her I needed time alone, and I made that clear. I'm going to circle, because what I think is part of the part that you might be able to adjust about this for your next relationship is your concept of what is clear and what is not clear. You say the word breakup did come up. It was brought up by both of us, but first by me. It's weird how you use a sort of passive verb on that. The word was brought up. It's like, you don't say, I broke up with her. I made it clear that I was breaking up with her. That's not what you say. You say, I needed time alone, and the word came up like it had a life of its own, and it came in, and it flew out of my mouth. It flew out of her mouth. I'm not really sure what to make of it, but she said, is that what's happening? And you nodded. Okay, nodding instead of going, yes, Angela, it's over, babe. That's it. That would be clear, but I nodded. That's ambiguous. All right. And I get it. But this, I just, the picture I have of this and the way that I feel drained reading the letter, I just think you are dealing with a vampire. And yeah, even coming close to the story, it's very draining. She looked sad when you nodded and when you asked for no contact. You asked, not told. When you want no contact, you don't ask for it, you declare it. All right? I'm just telling you here. I'm hearing the passivity in what you're doing here, and I think that's what it is. That spell that this whole relationship has cast over you. It's like drained your power to the point that you're like, please, can you just give me no contact, and not just pulling down the wall yourself. And then you asked for her to let you be in your power. So if it's your power, nobody has to let you be in it. Your power is your power, and you generate that power. You hold that power regardless of what she wants or allows, right? And you wanted to be allowed, she said, you asked her to let you be grounded. You asked her so that you could not be confused. You wanted to connect with your soul again and connect with the feeling that you had before you met. And so here, there's just like this crucial, mind F here, where it got you believing that she had to give that to you, that she held all the power. And because you fell into that false belief, it actually became a true situation. She had all that power over you. Not that she could do anything with it. She sounds very unwell. But the next morning, she sent you a selfie. So you said no contact. So she sends you a picture the next day because she was starting a new job. So you had said no contact, but did you have no contact? No, you typed back and said she looked good. Oh, you made her feel good about herself. And you said they're lucky to have you. But, actually, I don't think they are. Based on how she treated you, I think that it's very unlikely that that's going to go very well for people. But you gave her the compliment, and I just, that's a clue sometimes when somebody is emotionally abusive to you and you're like, you look good, honey. They're so lucky to have you. Like, in what dynamic do we do that, right? The dynamic would be more like narcissist and codependent. Again, can't diagnose anybody, but that's the dynamic that looks like. Then you say, please, no more contact. So again, please. Like you're begging her for no contact. And if you're serious about no contact, you can do it. You block the person, and if it comes to it, you can get a restraining order. And I don't think that would be totally out of line here because of what she ended up doing, okay? And then that's where you tell us about this. She waited about 2 days after you said no contact, so no respect here. And then she said, I'll wait for you to contact me. I could just see her calculating. What can I say to break contact and try to hook him in again? Okay, I'll wait for you to contact me. Okay, but you said no contact. Then she sent little sad face emoji and another. So she's just sitting there. It's like with a fishing pole, just casting out with her hook. Come on, Martin, come on. Come back to me. But with a hook, just like, ah. Not love. There's nothing here that's love. You know that, right? This is not love. This is consumption. Then she started flooding you with texts incessantly, trying to call you on the phone using guilt. It was all about her, yeah. She said, I'm trembling inside. Please have some compassion. So she's trying every tactic in the book. Oh, poor me. It's going to break me. She wanted to meet and come and have some sort of closure. Okay, big red flag word for anybody who's watched my videos, that word closure. In the context of a breakup, closure, sure. If you had a serious relationship, let's say you were married and suddenly the person leaves, or you were engaged, like in a serious committed relationship that suddenly ends and one person never knew why, then having that conversation eventually would be closure. But in this one, you don't need closure. There's no closure. Closure is almost always a code word for the opposite of closure. I just want to get together and talk so we can have some closure means I just want to get together and talk so I can hook you in again, get that emotional ball rolling again, right? So you say, when I didn't respond at all, her tactic went from guilt to anger and then rage. I'm not surprised because she's just trying the full spectrum of tactics to hook you in. She started smearing you on Facebook. Okay, this is where it goes from, I can't tell whether, it's emotional abuse because I wasn't there, but smearing people on Facebook, yes, that is abuse. And it may be going on still, except you've blocked her. Good job. After a couple months, though, I sent her a letter, you say, explaining my timeline. Okay, oops, so you had a relapse. That's what that is. And I know that your mind is thinking, okay, it was a couple months, but I'm just going to say, Martin, what were you thinking would happen if you explained your timeline? Like, what possible good could come from reaching out to an abusive, unstable person so that they know your timeline? Like, oh, now I know your timeline and what you believe happened. And then what happens? They say, oh, I'm so sorry. I was a jerk. I wish, or oh, I'm coming back to you. I realize I love you. You mentioned this. There's parts of the letter I didn't include. We had a very long exchange on it. But this is addiction, and that's addiction can sort of grab hold of your mind and make you think like, okay, it's been 2 months. I can do it now. Like, it's safe for me to have contact now, just like an alcoholic will go, okay, I didn't drink for 2 months. Now I can drink. It'll just be one. It'll be fine. You said it seemed like she felt entitled to you. You're right. You have very good perception about this. It's just that some part of your brain gets hijacked and just keeps thinking that somehow you can make it change if you just say and do the right thing. And so the rest of our hair just to go, oh yeah, we've done that too, and it never works. Okay. And you said she didn't have to respond, but you know what's going to happen. You said you wished her the best, and she didn't respond for more than a week. Oh, I like that tactic too. Like, let there be a little bit of worry that that you're not going to get back. That's how you sort of build suspense. In a trauma bond, you can never just get back to somebody. You have to delay it so that they just get all like wound up waiting for that, so that when they do get a lousy text from you, they're just like, I got a text. That's how trauma bonding works. It always has to be interspersed with neglect and abandonment and just coldness. And then, love bomb, right? When she did respond, she said, this is just to tell you I'll answer it soon. Okay? Then you say you didn't expect anything, but I'm going to say you did, or you would never have written her. And then maybe a month later, she called and she said, I'm just calling you to tell you I won't be answering your letter. Well, when you're not going to answer somebody's letter, you don't call them. That was a hook. That was another one. And I love that. It's like all dressed up as like, I've got boundaries, right? But it's not boundaries. It's a hook and it's a break of contact. But that's okay. We all do it. We're all just trudging along here trying to figure out, how do we love? How do we live life, right? So you're just like everyone here, and you're good. All right. But the text started again. So here come the texts from her, and she starts saying, come on, we're friends. Show some compassion. Be there for me. Okay, more of her tactics. So then you say, Martin, my problem is I want so badly to answer the texts. It's like, yep, that's what they were designed to do. And it's like an alcoholic who wants to take a drink. If I text her, I'll be hooked again, and I've come so far getting over her, but if I connect again, it'll be like starting from day one. So one thing that alcoholics do when they're in early sobriety is they don't go around people drinking. And they sometimes live in sober living houses, and they set themselves up to eliminate the trigger. And the trigger for you is contact with her. It would also be thinking about her, fantasizing that it could have been okay. And so this is, I would class this as a form of limerence with somebody you actually did have a relationship with, but you're having a romance with the idea, with that incredible experience you had in the first 3 months. And even though it went totally to hell, you're still like in love with that her and with that you and with that couple and that possibility that you once had there. And so the process of healing is going to involve just facing that and seeing it for what it was, that was the hope of what it was, but time did allow you to see what the reality of that relationship is. And a lot of what, you can learn a lot about relationships. We're so good at compartmentalizing things because of that crap fit thing from growing up, being very good at sort of compartmentalizing. It's like, I know that, mom and dad hit each other, but we're also a very nice family, and I can show that to the world. We get so good at compartmentalizing abusive behavior from this other part of life that it seems normal to you or possible to you that the person who treats you like this could actually be this, wonderful relationship. And so it keeps your heart engaged with it. And it's very painful to face reality and say, this is a very disturbed and unstable person. And we don't know, I don't know exactly what's wrong with her, but I know how she treats you, and it's unacceptable. And it's definitely nothing that would ever turn into a happy relationship. And so one gut check and reality check is, well, what does it feel like to be with this person? Well, what did it feel like to be with that person? Well, that is how it feels to be with that person. It feels like it just does not feel good. It makes you feel bad. It makes you angry. You turned it on yourself, like you're angry at yourself for putting up with it. But I think as time goes by, your anger will quite rightly be directed outward at the person who mistreated you. So it's interesting. You say, what I really want is that feeling that I had before we met. So, I think sometimes people come into our lives like a tornado, and they just come in and they wreck the whole trailer park. And we can remember how it was before that happened, but really what we're going to do now is take what we learned and move forward, because the one silver lining of a terrible relationship or anything bad that happens to us, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but when it's happened, you can begin to see what are your tender spots, where is your unhealed trauma, what is your vulnerability to abuse. So it points you to where you can begin to heal and work on that. Now, I teach these techniques, the daily practice, to start unpacking and releasing the fearful and resentful thoughts and beliefs about yourself and the world that would have you, impulsively following decisions in your life that are more driven by trauma than by what you really want or what's good for you or what is going to bring love into your life. Of course, we want love in your life. You absolutely deserve to have a good, loving person who appreciates you for who you are. So this happened. Wash it out of your hair. And I really encourage you to get extremely active and structured in your approach to healing from the trauma that would allow this to happen to you. If it happens once, it kind of increases the odds that it's going to happen again, especially afterwards. It's weird how it works like that. It's almost like it forms a magnetic groove in you, and you very easily can fall right into the same thing. Or you could change the pattern, but a lot of times that takes a conscious effort to change that pattern. So it's conscious effort time. And you got in touch with me, which is so brave, and is, I do hope very much that what I'm saying to you can help you believe in yourself enough to take action. I'm going to also recommend you have no contact at all, even if it requires a restraining order with this person. This is just flat out toxic. So you had said, I don't know what to grieve, the woman you thought you loved, the relationship you thought you had, or the person you were before you met. You get to grieve. That is what heartbreak is. And the good news is what feels like it's about the other person is usually more about the ideal that we had. And the ideal with that person has been lost, but it's been revealed for what it is. And the beautiful relationship that you crave still lies ahead of you. And all you need to do to become ready for it is to heal. I know, easier said than done, but that's what this channel's all about.